Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight. There's a lot of people signed up for it, and if you excuse me, if you are not here live, it will be recorded and available on our website. Tonight is very special. My good friend and longtime colleague, Rik McCoy of McCoy Horticultural. We've known each other for over 20 years. Met him while I was doing plant healthcare in the Princeton area, and I I can remember going to some of the residents that he was working on. I was just blown away by the knowledge he has on plants and how he maintained them. And we, like I said, we became close friends and do a lot of work together. So, with that, Rik, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate that. It has been 20 years. Might be longer than that.
Okay, 22, 25, 20,
But
80 years.
Closer to 30, 25 or 30. So it has been a while. And I always blame Barry for the reason that we do things organically. So it's all his fault. One time he walked onto one of our properties to do an application. And around that time, I was looking at things a little differently. And he said, why don't you think about doing things organically? And I said, it never works and it's too expensive. So, 25 years later, we're still at it. So it works out for sure. So thanks, Barry, and Diane and Rachel. Thanks for manning the ship there. I am Richard McCoy, and I am the owner of Richard McCoy Horticultural Services. What we're going to talk about tonight is organic and ecological land care and low impact as a business model. It's not something that we talk about a lot, but it is important. The reason being is not only from a business standpoint, but also the transition that we had from a conventional program to the programs that we now use that are organic and ecological. Let me just get my screen up going here. So we, just some of my background, started the company in 1998. Started it in the landscape industry in the early 90s. And in 98 started my company. And again, everything we did was conventional: synthetic pesticides, non-native plants, invasive species, not really paying attention to stormwater management, all the things that landscape and landscape contractors should be paying attention to now. We were just in line with everybody else back at that point. Over the years, like I mentioned at the onset there, I had started noticing things looking a little differently on our properties. And around 2005 is when we started to begin our transition to organic from conventional. So I don't have a college degree. I've School of Hard Knocks, and these are my accumulated things I've accumulated over time, which means I guess I'm some sort of an expert on some level. Just a couple of highlights. 2016 Smithsonian Archives of American Gardens is a pretty important thing for us. In 2021, I became the Northeast rep for a group called AGSA, which we'll talk about a little bit if you're not familiar. It's the American Green Zone Alliance, and an advisor for a couple of groups, including Non-Toxic Communities, which is Diane and Rachel's group there. So thanks, guys. Appreciate that. So there's a couple things to think about. No company is built equally. Doesn't matter whether it's a conventional company or whether it is an organic ecological company. Every company is different. Every company has its strengths. Every company has weaknesses. And a lot of the organic transition depends upon what your predisposition is to change. Are you open to it? Are you aggressive, or are you kind of laid back? The opportunity that presents itself with organic land care, or are you risk averse and just want to sort of stay the path and not get mixed up with let the others take the lead and follow them, or do you want to be one of the ones that jumps out in front? To that point, every path will be different. Like I mentioned, when I started in the early 90s as an arborist, one of the things that I did, and I think one of the things that helped me identify plants, was my crew chief would ask me, what in the middle of winter, doing 60 miles an hour down 287 as we're going between Somerset and Hunterdon County, what kind of trees are on the side of the road, and I'd have to name them as we were passing them. So in the dead of winter, you're looking at the shapes of the trees and the bark, not the bark structure, but the branch structure, and you had to identify them quickly. So that's how my path started. And also with that, there were a couple other things that I'll touch on. So what we're going to do
Rick, I'll
first.
just interrupt you. You're
Yeah.
probably one of the few landscapers who knows the Latin names for all the plants. Got to give you credit for that.
Thanks. It's common names get me mixed up. I prefer the botanical Latin. It just makes things easier for me anyway. So thanks. I appreciate that. So what we're going to talk about is some of the background field work, like I just started to mention, new methods and strategies. And the most important part why we're here is, can we make money? And if we can make money, which I know we can, how do we do that? So again, late 80s, early 90s was when I began in the trade. One of the things we used to do is we used to go around with our 1,000-gallon spray rigs, spraying tree canopies for, as the job card read, leaf chewing and sucking insects, which means we were effectively killing everything on the properties. We did a lot, like I mentioned, with non-native species, really high-end maintenance. Some of this was with my former employer, and some of this was as on my own. Once I formed Rik McCoy Horticultural Services. So you can see it was pretty high end. Bad picture, but the idea is that it's pretty high end work. Like I mentioned, one of our properties in 2016 was recognized by the Smithsonian Archives of American Gardens. You can go to our website. You can go to the Smithsonian. You can look up Stony Wood in Princeton, and that's where you'll find this information, which is pretty awesome. So moving forward, 2005 and on, that's when we started looking at things a little differently. We started paying attention to soil biology. And one of the things I noticed, as I started to say before, was we noticed that the leaf size was off, flower color was off, plants were weak, they were struggling. And, we took the approach like most gardeners do. We need to put, compost and manures and things like that on plant material. Why? Because it's good for the plants, or so we thought. What we didn't know at the time is what we were actually doing is we were actually starting to put organic matter into the soil to feed the biology of the soil. And the thing that made me realize that was I started using a product called PHC Biopack. It was a synthetic fertilizer with some biology, and it had some bacteria, some dormant bacteria in it. And when we started to use that, I started to notice a difference in some of these plants. And one of the things we used to do is, I recall back when we were doing some of our plantings, we were planting in pouring down rainstorms. Probably should have been planting rice instead of, begonias and impatiens and things like that, because the ground was just so wet, because we were forced into doing things that, if a client had a party or something coming up on the weekend, weather didn't matter. We had to get the job done because, well, we had a deadline. Now I look at things a bit differently, and I definitely spread out. There's always a crush at some point, but we try to spread things out as much as possible so that we don't have those issues with soil and the weather. We try to stay off the soil and working with the soil when it's wet as much as possible. One of the things that really, besides meeting Barry, was this book, Teaming with Microbes. It's a great starter book. If you don't know much about soil biology, it's a good way to get you started. It's pretty simple read, relatively speaking. It's a complex issue, but Jeff Lowenfeld does a great job of really explaining it fairly rudimentary that you can understand. The other thing too was around 2005, 2006 was when I went to a course at Duke Farm, and Barry was there. Chip was there. Chip Osborne was there, who Chip Osborne will be on next week, right, Barry? The 29th? That's
Yep.
Correct? Yep. So he was there. Late Bill Dusing was there, and a couple other folks. And they started talking about soil biology. And it did, just around this point, I really did not know much or anything about soil biology. And they started playing, showing these slides of the microbes and the fungi and all the different things that happen under the soil. And once I started to, dig more deeply into that, I realized that there was definitely something greater going on that we need to work with. And once you start working with the soil, you realize that it's not supposed to be a big, heavy clay compacted mess, depending upon where you're at. Here in Princeton, New Jersey, where we do most of our work, it's very heavy clay soil, and it can be very difficult to get loose and friable. So If we have issues of soil compaction in our garden beds, we'll use an air spade to turn that soil over, work in some organic matter, and then underplant with native plants and stay off that ground. And then you end up with this loose friable soil. You can see all the fine root hairs. The larger images are the fine root hairs, the root tips, and the sort of fuzzier looking material is fungal hyphae. So all those things are integral in having healthy soil. Another thing that really flipped the script was a book called Bringing Nature Home, a book by Dr. Doug Talmy, who is a University of Delaware entomologist. If you haven't seen this book and you're interested in ecology and your native plants in your backyard or front yard, this is definitely a book that, again, will get you started off on the right foot for sure. The whole thing about this is to eliminate turf grasses, and this is all things we're going to talk about. You eliminate turf grasses, and in those areas where you eliminate turf grasses, you incorporate native plants. You start to build ecosystems, build ecosystem services, and start to build corridors where these insects can pollinate from place to place without having these big eco deserts where there are no native plants for them to habitat. Obviously, this is why we do this. We got our little skippers, we got our monarchs, amongst other things. Again, we were spraying our tree canopies for every living thing that you could possibly kill with a pesticide. Fast forward to now, or previously, knowing that pesticides are for us were a bad thing, and then we realized that you have these beneficial insects that do the work for you. So you have aphids that can be eaten by ladybugs. You have parasitic wasps that are doing work too. So all these things are there if you pay attention to the ecology and it's okay if plants get eaten because that's what they're there for. There was a meme that circulated a while back and I think it was Dr. Talmy who says this: if you're looking at an oak tree and that oak tree has the leaves chewed on it and you're worried about the aesthetics of it, step back 10 feet. You won't see the trees being chewed. So it's really, the aesthetic is what it is, but it's from a distance. If your plants are getting eaten, besides the fact if it's like gypsy moss or something that's invasive, if it's a natural ecosystem that's working, your plants are going to get eaten and they're supposed to. That's the way it works. So why is that so important? Just for one example, with Dr. Talmy's work, we know that one oak tree will attract 513 species of Lepidoptera, and those are caterpillars. And that's just butterflies and moths. So that's not even including spiders, true bugs, all the other insects that are inhabiting that canopy. And the benefit to this is obviously when we have these insects and these ecosystems in place, we're feeding food webs. Just for example, you may or may not know that some of the work of a graduate student of Dr. Talmy, Desiree Narango, she did the chickadee study, which defined the 70% mark for native plants on a property. And that chickadee study said that over the course of 18 weeks, a parent group of chickadees would bring back over 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to feed that nest. And 90% of our terrestrial birds feed their young caterpillars for that spring season. So you could think about damage that one person did for 4 or 5 years spraying trees versus the way we're trying to do things now as build ecology and work with the systems that the earth has instead of trying to work against them. So again, pretty important that we stop using pesticides. And again, part of this is we'll show you how, that there's a model for doing it this way. So in 2001, we became the AGSA Green Zone Service Pro company. We're the first in New Jersey, and we're pretty proud of that. There's a class we take, and I'll get to this at the end of the program. There's an online class that folks can take, and we took that, and that's what got us certified online. And then you take a portion classroom, and a test, and then you become AGSA Certified Pro company. Ta-da! Okay. So with AGSA, we have to transition to all electric equipment. Everybody, like I mentioned, everybody has their own path, and our path, as per usual, is to dive in with both feet and hold our breath and hope it works. So we bought these 2 electric mowers sight unseen, and just put them to work, and that's 3 years now, and we love them. My guys love them, and they work just as good as a gas piece of equipment. String trimmer, same thing. Everything, it's just a different. You just have to look at things differently. Like one of the pushbacks on some of the equipment is, well, the backpack blower certainly is the weak link in the chain. And with the backpack blowers, we know that they are, and I usually tell people that they are 50% more, 50% less output at twice the cost of a gas backpack blower, which is obviously a problem, but that is the weak link. But everything else, chainsaws, string trimmers, different sort of means of working with it, but same effectiveness. And again, the backpack blowers, they do work, but they do not work as well as a gas blower. Unfortunately, not yet anyway. So if you're dealing with a resident within a municipality where you have a ban on gas backpack blowers, again, part of this whole philosophy is that we're trying to minimize lawn areas where leaves are actually accumulating or laying on a lawn, and get them into the side beds where we can leave them for the winter, and maybe not even take them up in the spring. The whole idea of leaving the leaves is sort of where we go with that. But again, you can't leave leaves on the lawn. It will ultimately end up killing it. So we need to put them somewhere. So again, we try to reduce the lawn areas and just, if we're not
You do a
shredding
lot of mulch mowing though, don't you?
as much as possible. Yes, Barry, thanks. So what we do is, as far as late into the season as we can, we will mulch everything up. Once the leaves get to as dense as they are here on this lawn, you're not gonna be able to mulch them. It's too heavy unless you consolidate them. Maybe on a driveway, you could mulch them up and then spread them back on the lawn or back in the beds or something like that. So whole point of this is there's a lot of different ways. You need to get creative in your thinking, and instead of just taking that box and recreating that box that you have for the past, like I said, mine and Barry's case is 20, 30, 40 years, and open that box up and look at it differently. Instead of looking in the box, look underneath it and see what's underneath that box, and that might change the way you're doing things. As I said, we jump in with both feet. So last year we implemented a 1.8 kilowatt solar trailer. And with this solar trailer, what we can do is we're completely off grid except for the fall when the sun angle gets low, late in October. But at that point, we only have about 2 weeks left in the season where we're using our electric equipment. And then we transition to gas when the leaves get real heavy. So with this, we can charge all our hand tools during the day. And then at night, the larger mowers, the 48 volt lawn mowers, we charge those. You can see on the left-hand side of the trailer are the chargers for the 48 volt mowers. So that's a self-contained charging unit, which is pretty cool. Definitely pretty cool. And this year, the robots are coming. We have 10 of our clients that we are deploying robotics, which I'm really excited about. The technology of the robotic mowers has really come a long way. I've been wanting to do this probably for about 3 years now, and I was always reluctant to pull the trigger. But I'm diving in with both feet this year, as we usually do. I've seen the technology, I've seen them work. I know a lot of people that use them, and they rave of them. And there's again a different part of the business model where you're not going to have employees out on the property mowing every week. You'll have them go and they'll do some of the trimming and bed work. So this takes some of that labor risk away. If as we know in the landscape industry and every industry, it's hard to get employees. So this will certainly help with that.
Rick, I got a question on that. So I think what you're saying is you do have the robots doing the mowing while you have a crew on the property that can,
so yeah,
oversee it.
Yeah. So just briefly, the way these work, instead of mowing every week, they mow constantly. Sunshine, moonshine, rain shine, any shine. They're constantly mowing, which is, again, I was reluctant at first when I first started hearing about the robotics, because it just didn't sit right with me, just like with organics, right? In my first inclination with organics, I just didn't think it was going to work. But then as I opened up and started to welcome this new thinking in, I realized that this was going to be a model that worked for us. So the way these work is they constantly cut. We have an app that will control them if we need to stop them on a weekend or we get some heavy rain and we don't want them out. And then they're constantly cutting. It's like a Roomba, like the vacuums inside your house. They just constantly go around and round and round, and they make micro cuts. So instead of cutting 2/3 of a grass blade or 1/3 of a grass blade, it's making, 1/8 of an inch cuts. So you're leaving smaller pieces of debris behind. There's no blowing of the lawn. Plus the weight, it's very light. You don't have to worry about the mowers, the weight of the mower. So you're alleviating some soil compaction as well doing this. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. Okay. So from here, we're going to get into some business model stuff. If anybody has any questions, Rachel or Diana, if anybody has any questions in the chat, we can touch on them, or we can wait till we get to the end.
We're all clear. If anyone has a question, they can ask to be unmuted and we can go from here. But so far there's not. Oh, here we go.
I just wanted to say, Rick, you chose the correct electric people. I noticed you had Mean Green and Husqvarna. You really can't get better. They're kind of the top of the heap.
Yeah, well, thanks, John. I appreciate that. So it's like when I wear my AGSA hat, I need to be brand neutral. But when I'm wearing my McCoy horticultural hat, it's pretty obvious the tools that we picked. And yeah, we're pretty happy with them. But just to touch on that too, if anybody's looking for electric equipment, the tools that we use are AFT certified. And what that means is they're AGSA field tested certified, which means that our founder of AGSA is from Southern California, and he's taken these tools out into Death Valley and tested them in the heat. He's done side-by-side comparisons with gas equipment. So we know the workload capacity and also the capabilities of these tools because of being AGSA field tested certified. We know that they're good to go. And if you purchased one of the AGSA certified tested piece of equipment, you probably would not be dissatisfied with what you're getting. And so the AGSA website is agsa.net, and you can find that there if anybody's interested in that.
Rick,
yes, Rachel.
Eric has a question. He wants to know what the highest the mowers can cut.
3.6 inches. 3.6 inches. Depending upon the model. Somebody's got their mic up. I'm hearing some feedback. So if you guys can mute yourselves, I appreciate it. Unless you have a question. Nothing? Okay. So 3.6 inches, depending upon the model, but the one using the max height is 3.6. Okay, we're good to go. Okay. So part of, like I mentioned in the onset, is Rachel or Diana, maybe you can mute everybody, please. Reducing lawn size is important with what we're doing, incorporating native plants, and we're developing those webs and ecosystem functions, and we're helping increase water infiltration. Again, we're pulling the edges in instead of like just dropping native plants through the middle of somebody's yard. It needs to be thought out, because there is a queue for care that we need to utilize and stay within, because folks are not ready for a meadow in their front yard. Some folks of our clients might be, but chances are their neighbors won't be, and appease the neighbors from their aesthetic. And or edges where you can't get grass to grow, where it's difficult to get grass to grow, you can incorporate native plants and eliminate that turf grass, which eliminates a lot of wasted money in grass seed and fertilization and things like that, water, etc. Rain gardens infrastructure. This is a rain garden. This rain garden is about 500 square feet, and over the course of 5 years will capture and infiltrate over 2 million gallons of water. And it just so happens that Benjamin Vogt, in his new book, happened to use this photograph on page 70. So if anybody goes and picks up Benjamin Vogt's book, look on page 70, and you'll see that nice little picture of one of our rain gardens in his book there. Benjamin Vogt's pretty awesome. He's got another book, which I'm going to draw a blank on. It used to be Blonde Moments, now they're Gray Moments. Can't remember the name of his first book. So, but look him up. Rain gardens, if you put the right plant in the right place, which is something we always preach, you can go from something that is bare soil to 1 year later being something that's pretty full of pollinators, caterpillars, all kinds of good stuff that we're looking for. A little more green infrastructure, permeable walkways, that kind of thing too helps get that water infiltrated. Okay, so what are we looking for? We're looking to problematic invasive species. We want to pull those out, utilize native plants, obviously, for any of those things. So in this particular example, everything in the foreground that's nice and, you know, purple and white and pretty and awesome looking used to be Pachysandra. So we removed all the Pachysandra that was full of fungal issues and dying back, and alfalfa mosaic, and it wasn't long for this world. So we took it all out and incorporated our phlox, Tiarella. There's ferns in here, a lot of different things. So you just have to, again, not look at that palette as a static green layer. Look at it in terms of color, and you know, this looks fine in the wintertime as well too. So and what do we do about maintenance practices? They are definitely different. We like to make what we do in particular instances like this, where you have a lot of space and it's not a foundation planting. And again, at the onset, like I mentioned, anybody who might have joined late, this sort of work is not for everybody. It doesn't suit everybody's property, but you can work within the parameters that I'm laying out here and make this work for almost any client that has any kind of open idea about native plants and started to move forward. Foundation plantings, you almost most of the times have to go back to sort of the old style of cutting back in the fall, cleaning the beds out, making them look nice, as you would conventionally. But when you have a lot of space like this and you're able to utilize this space in a way where you can cut the natives, cut them down and just leave them in the spring, that's going to be your best ecological approach to managing the landscape. So we leave everything up for the winter. And then in the spring, right around now, obviously, we're getting in there and we're starting to cut our perennials back, but we don't cut them and take them away. Like I mentioned, we cut them if it's 4 feet high, if it's a 4 foot high or 3 foot high, like echinacea or something like that, or eupatorium that might be 6 or 8 feet tall. We'll cut it in 12 to 16 foot sections and let it drop right in between all the crowns of the plant material. So what that does, instead of taking all those leaves out where you have all those overwintering insects, whether it's, you know, overwintering caterpillars or overwintering native bees or whatever the case is, you don't take that ecology off the property, you leave it. And from this close up, it may look a little sloppy, but it's going to benefit the landscape in the long run. So, and we leave our, up by the crowns, we leave the crowns up about 12 to 18 inches because a lot of those stems are hollow, and that's where our native bees will spend their summers, right? Our native bees are solitary, so they'll drill down into these hollow stems, and that's where they'll nest for the summer. So again, it's all about leaving ecology, making ecology, building ecology, leaving ecology. That's what it looks like in the summer. Excuse me. So when you're doing this work, you have to take the big picture into consideration, and you know, that to me, I think is a win, right? You can leave all that stuff there in the winter. You don't, it's a cost savings for the homeowner because you're not bringing in, you know, 75 yards of mulch into a property like this every year. You're originally 75, second year might have been 50, third year might have been 25. And, you know, now after 6 years, I think we're down to 15 yards of mulch where we're just edging, like you see my cursor maybe. If you see my cursor just right along the edge, all we're doing is touching up the edges. And by now, this is actually an older picture, but this is all, there's only about 4 inches of bed that's exposed right now. All those plants have covered that bed edge up. So all we do is just touch up the bed edges, and that makes it nice and neat, along with cutting down those perennials in the spring, and it's all a good thing. Organic turf management. This is a project that we're working on with one of Barry and my very good friends, Mike Colnut and Lincoln Landscapes. We're partnering on this property, and we're doing it. I think we're doing a pretty cool job at that. That's pretty good organic looking lawn right there. Grub control. Haven't put grub control down since 2005 because we're incorporating native plants. So when you incorporate these native species and you bring in these beneficials and you get those ecosystems working on the side over here, you got a scoliated wasp, which will come and parasitize the grubs. And when those grubs are parasitized by the wasp, they die. So you don't need to, you know, well, whether it's milky spore or BT or whatever the product of your choice is, that some of these don't even work on all the grubs that are in the ground. You have that natural system of parasitic wasps coming in and taking care of the grubs. And some grubs are good. Some grubs will provide aeration, right? So you just have to have a threshold. And like I said, we have not had to do any grub control of any kind since 2005 because we're building these ecosystems. So we currently manage about 45 properties. So this is some business stuff here. So let's get into this. So currently we have about 45 properties. That's actually dipped. We're doing probably about 30 now, and I'll talk about how we got to 30, but still making a good top line and bottom line revenue. We're hopefully looking towards just around under $1 million. Currently under $1 million. By 2025, we're looking to be at or over. We have about 4 17 members, should be 8 to 12. Still get, but the way things are going with labor for us, maybe not everybody, but for us for sure, we're having issues with that. Okay, so we do 15 to 20% in profit. I'm just having a little trouble here with my taskbar. It's in the way of some of my stuff here. All right, so revenue's up. So how is revenue up if we have less team members? And we're not able to supposedly do the work that we're supposed to do. So what we'll do is, or what I've done is when we go back and I review our projects or properties over the course of a season, and we're doing a profit or a rate increase, we will typically raise those rates on maybe everybody, may not be everybody, maybe some of the segments of our service offerings. It may be everything, just sort of depends. But the key to this is you may have some clients that are lower profit margin. You will have some clients that are a higher profit margin. And as you're 9 times out of 10, the lower profit margin properties are may not be the exact properties that you want to be maintaining. You want to try and target those properties that are a little higher profit margin. So as you're raising your rates, the properties that are a little high profit margin, hopefully the threshold is a little higher, and they will tolerate, incremental or larger increases in their revenue. And as you lose the lower profit margin properties and you're raising your rates, the new clients that you bring in seasonally will be at that higher profit margin. So you're effectively eliminating the lower profit margin as you're increasing your profit margins with newer clients, if that makes sense. But that's basically how we do it. With 4 to 17 members, like I said, our revenue has been up because we've been taking that strategy of rate increases, bringing on new clients that at that higher rate, and eliminating the lower profit margin properties. So I mentioned earlier I mentioned a couple of books that are field wise, but this is one of the ones that really changed the way I looked at the business strategy. It's called the E-Myth Landscape Contractor. So the original book by Michael Gerber, the E-Myth, is a pretty cool book. This one is even better. So what he did in E-Myth, the Landscape Contractor, is he took a very well-known landscape company doing over $20 million, I believe it was over $20 million in revenue. And what he did is he took his E-Myth book and he made that owner of that company, he supplemented the regular E-Myth chapters with chapters from this landscape contract owner, which I found like greatly motivating and also amazingly informational. But one of the things, like most landscape contractors, that Michael Gerber says in his book, like if you looked at this text here, the technician is suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure, which was definitely the way I started my company, right? I started my company going into it, we were busy, we did a lot of work. Busy is not profitable. And that was the way I looked at, I took the leap, I started my business, hence the seizure, not knowing how to run a business at all. And that was problematic probably for the first 10 to 15 years. Because like I said, I was busy and we were making money, but we weren't necessarily profitable. And busy does not equal profit. So the last quote here, the entrepreneur lives in the future, never in the past, rarely in the present. So if you look back, you see your mistakes you've made. You look in the present, things you're doing, but the big thing is to look into the future and how you're going to change strategies and move forward within your company, and how you can make yourself more profitable within your company. Usually efficiencies, again, raising rates incrementally so you don't lose all your clients at once. One thing I should mention too about that rate increase strategy is you're only doing that with half your clients, right? So you do that with half your clients, then you 1 year, and then you do it with the other half the other year. So that way your clients don't get a price increase shock. They don't all jump off the boat. And if it looks like you're going to lose too many, when you do that second half rate increase, you can pull that number back a little bit, which might be a little more tolerable. Still, you'll be profitable. The clients would still be a little more profitable. The properties will still be a little more profitable. So the things we're talking about, the battery powered equipment, the green infrastructure, and things of that nature, we are sort of in the innovators to early adopters range. So to me, even though we've been doing this since 2005, there is still a great amount of growth in this segment. If you're thinking about getting in now, I would not hesitate for a second. We turn work away. Like I said, right now we should have 12 employees. We probably could have 20, but we don't, only because, again, it's an issue. So we're in the 2.5 to 13.5, somewhere right in the middle of that, and maybe even closer to innovators because it is so new, some of the technologies that are coming out. But, if you're early majority, you're probably okay. What you don't want to be is you don't want to be late and on the downside of that curve, because then you've missed the boat for growth. What's it take? The business model takes a lot of patience. You need to be observant. You have to be very curious, understanding why these changes that you're making, or what these changes you're making and what these changes are doing, both financially and in the field as you're making those tweaks in your field work. It takes a commitment. It takes a big commitment. If you're going to go in with both feet like we did, your commitment does not need to be so drastic if you're just taking incremental steps, which is probably the best way to do it. Because incremental steps will allow you to learn, your learning curve, and you're also your clients' learning curve with you will be more tolerable, instead of just going cold turkey and making big changes that they might not expect. It does take a lot of time. Everything we've done is voluntary, so it takes time to make that transition. And of course, it takes money. The things we're talking about are not cheap. That solar trail that I showed you and that one setup, that's about a $70,000 setup there. You say I'm crazy. Now, if you think about it, those two electric mowers will save us $4,200 per setup. We have two of those. We'll have two of those setups this year. So we're going to be saving effectively $8,400 on fuel every year. Just fuel for those two pieces of equipment, right? So over time, it definitely pays off. There's a lot less maintenance on this equipment. So it's definitely something that is doable if you sort of have the mindset of these things I'm speaking of. Another good way to look at this is the profit first approach. Typically, when your accountant, if you have an accountant, when they look at your books, they look at your bottom line and whatever's left first, and whatever's left is your profit. What profit first does is it teaches you to take that profit first, right? So as an owner of a company, you're going to pay yourself, and that what you should be paying yourself is roughly 12% of your gross revenue. Then with that, your profit you pay yourself, and your profit goes on top of that. Then everything else comes afterwards. You pay your bills. Then if you have any money left, then you can go out and purchase equipment with that leftover money. Again, this is not something that happens quickly. It's a completely mind shift. And it's just a different way of looking at things. But when you start to take this approach, you're going to realize that one of the goals for our company, we do have some debt, but one of the goals for our company is to be a debt negative company. So that we're working on a cash basis only. Not easy, not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of work and discipline, but it's doable. But you can do, like I said, 15, we're doing about 20%. I do know companies that do 30% bottom line revenue, net profit. So, it's definitely doable. So how do we do it? We charge more for premium cutting services, improved efficiencies. So when you're looking at this stuff, efficiencies are huge, because if you are going to charge more, you need to be efficient, because you can't be wasting money on small little things that might be eating up your day. Reoccurring auto renew revenue. So our contracts they're 1 year. A client can get out anytime they like. But everything is reoccurring and it renews every season without having to redo the contract. So our proposals are 11 pages. They're lengthy. We sit down with our clients, we go through it, we get their programs in place. Once they're in place, they never have to look at this document again unless we need to change something. Again, and what I mean by reoccurring, that reoccurring is set on a 10-month payment plan. So our clients are effectively paying the same price per month for 10 months from March 1st to December 1st. So what this does, it not only gives them the comfort in being able to budget, but it's hugely effective in preserving your cash flow, and understanding when that money's coming in, how much money's coming in, when it's coming in. It could be the first of the month, you could space it out, one increment's the first, one increment the 15th. You could do it however you like, but it definitely helps with cash flow. Implementing software, we started using Jobber, which is software for our scheduling. There's others out there. There's Service Autopilot, there's LMN, there's a handful, many different types of softwares that you can use for your scheduling and CRM. But that is definitely an efficiency booster, because it takes a lot of work out of your scheduling. It not only does it take work out of your scheduling, but it's nice for your team to see where they're at, to look ahead, to be able to think forward and be able to think for themselves, as opposed to the owner or manager their hand. And then again, the goal for this is to reach the ROI on battery powered equipment and green infrastructure, or our charging infrastructure, which again, we're saving $8,400 a year just in the mower fuel alone. So, it's going to takes about 5 years to get that ROI back on everything, but depending upon the equipment, if you're starting with the smaller hand tools, that ROI is going to be even quicker. You can get the ROI on string trimmers and chainsaws in 2 years, depending upon how often you're using it and what your kilowatt hour per charging is. All right, market target demographics. So the thing about this is, when you target people that want this kind of work, talk about efficient, you really are just going to people who want this kind of work. They're calling you, they visited your website. Hopefully by now, if you have a business, you have a website, and you're specifying that you're doing this kind of work, and you're doing your search keywords and all those things, and SRO, whatever the SRO is, the search optimization stuff. Not my thing, obviously. So hopefully you have somebody that's doing that for you. And once you start to target to people that you want to sell to, it makes your life a whole lot easier, because you eliminate people that you eliminate people that aren't going to buy your services. And that's something you definitely don't want. You also need to prepare to say no, but I'll touch on that in a second. So specifically, residents that are looking for this type of work, they are in high demand. Your efficiency cost for marketing efficiencies is very low for client acquisition. We probably spend $2,000 a year on our marketing. And that might even be generous. I don't even think we do that much, because it's so targeted. We don't have to. Not to mention the fact it's not only targeted, but there are only a handful of companies that are offering the different levels of work that we offer. Other companies are doing things like we do. Obviously, we're not the only ones, but we definitely differentiate ourselves like that. First bullet, differentiation by offering these services to people that want it. They're not going to go to somebody, hopefully wouldn't go to somebody who is the typical mow and blow, because they value the type of work that you're doing versus the mow and blow companies that are, just doing that. So sell your story. That's sort of what I've done over the course of this webinar, right? I started out telling people how we did it and how we got to this point. Sell your story of you and your unique brand, which is, again, what I'm sort of doing here without this being an infomercial. It's really the strategy of transitioning from conventional to organic. And these strategies would work with any landscape company, probably work with a construction company. They're not specific to landscaping. They're really just good business strategies. Avoid competing on price and no lowballing. So when you start to, if you jump into that end of the pool where you're competing on price, it's a losing battle. Because the client will turn around and very likely will find somebody else for $5 cheaper to find the work that you're doing at a higher level. You just don't compete on price. Be okay with saying no. That's something I do all the time. I did it just the other day. As a matter of fact, I went to a client's house and they were asking us to do things that we don't typically do. And I respectfully bowed out and said, we don't do this kind of work. I'm sure you can find somebody that can do it. But that takes time, that takes guts to be able to say that takes knowing that there is another client around the corner that wants the services you're providing. If you're just first starting this, you may have to be okay with not saying no. You need to grab whatever work you can get to build a reputation. But as you build your reputation, as you build your market share, you'll be able to attract the kind of people you want to work for. That's when you'll be able to say no to some of the clients that you don't necessarily want to work for. Client and company alignment. This goes along with being able to say no. If you're battling back and forth with the philosophy that you're guiding yourself towards versus a conventional philosophy, that's not something that you want to be bothered with. It's, I'm all about education, and I want to teach our clients about the best ways of doing things, or the best way we think of doing things. But to that point, there is a line where I'll say, I'll bow out, and I'll say no, that we're not a right fit, because this is this is something that you want to do long-term for these clients. It's not something you want to turn around and just lose them in a year. You want to be on those properties for years at a time. Offer a higher standard of care, and with those higher standards of care, you will be able to offer better warranties and guarantees. Identify your strengths and feed that strength. If you're good at lawn maintenance, then maybe go after electric equipment first. If you're good at plant material, maybe go after native plants and green infrastructure. Simplify and stay away from the shiny stuff. If you are crazy about compost, but you can't find a way to make that profitable, don't try to sell compost or build compost piles on your property to try to sell if it's not profitable. Like I mentioned, you're going to have your own way of doing things, and it's important to find out what's important, what's profitable, what matches your philosophy, and what you're going to be able to do that's going to be profitable for you. Improve cash flow, like I mentioned, with the auto renew and auto pay, credit card, or ACH. You can invoice by services, weekly or monthly. We do, like I mentioned, everything monthly. We will do by the service also, but the majority of our work is monthly. We do have some services that we provide that if we finish that service, the second we finish that service, we press an invoice button, and that client is invoiced for that work. And hopefully within the next couple of days, we get either a credit card payment or it's directly debited from their ACH account. When you're doing things organically, ecologically, you do not cut corners. There's no greenwashing. You can't say you're going to do something and do it conventionally. Again, raise your bar and raise your rates. You got to back up your higher prices with better quality work, better customer service, and better guarantees, like I mentioned. Identify your model, your plan, and work the plan. So with that, our plan has changed drastically from jump to where we are now. And it constantly changes, right? Like I just mentioned at the onset, if anybody didn't catch the beginning, or sort of towards the middle, we're implementing robotic mowers for the first time this year. And that's a bit of a leap, but we feel like the area where we work and the business model that we have, it suits our business plan. But that's what we're talking about tweaking, right? Finding things that are in your lane and tweak that plan. If it's something that's not working, you got to jettison that idea and regroup and find another way to work through that. Ask for help. Anybody that's on this call, Barry knows me, Rachel, obviously, and Diana. I'm always here. Barry's here. Our group AGSA with Dan Mabe, we're here to help anybody that's trying to do this kind of work, because we feel as though the people that are getting in now will have a better footing when it becomes, hopefully someday it becomes mainstream. But we definitely want to help you guys make this a business model and move the organic and ecological philosophy further into the industry. I've been on a couple of podcasts recently, and we're getting ready to wrap up, and we can take some questions. A couple of podcasts. Native Plants, Healthy Planet podcast is one of my favorite podcasts. Backyard Ecology is awesome. So you guys can go take a look at that. Episode 19, we are the second most listened to on the Native Plants, Healthy Planet podcast, which is pretty awesome. 46 and 88 on there. And then again, the Backyard podcast, the Backyard Ecology podcast was pretty good. Just for the instance of, it was really driven towards battery powered equipment. So the conversation was very, very weighted towards battery equipment. Most of the time, the Backyard Ecology podcast is native plants and things of that nature. Native Plants, Healthy Planet podcast is just a these guys are great. Pinelands Nursery is a local New Jersey native plant nursery where we also get a lot of our plants from. Yep, and so we're wrapping up. So just real quick, the group Ags of the American Green Zone Alliance that I work with, we have courses that we offer. They are online, they are in Spanish, and this is doing its own thing now. Glad it wasn't doing this in the beginning. So we have 15 online courses that'll teach the fundamentals of electric power. There it goes. Goodbye. All right. So anyway, if you're interested, Barry and I are going to be doing another Ags-centric webinar sometime in May. So we'll offer this again. But if there's that QR code, if you're interested in the 15 online lessons and getting an Ags Certified Service Pro certification, we're offering that tonight for a discount. So snap that QR code on your phone and you could register for that. There's a lot of things involved. Sorry, that one slide wasn't sticking around, but is what it is. Sorry about that. And then lastly, this is my information. If you snap that QR code there, that'll give you all my contact information. Just make sure you save it to your contacts. All my contact, all the stuff on the left, website, phone number, social media, all that within that QR. And that's all I have. Thank you, Barry, for having me, Rachel and Diana for helping out, and the group. Thanks for being on. I appreciate your time.
Rik, as usual, a great presentation.
Thank you.
Like I said earlier, we've known each other for quite a while, and the amount of expertise and growth that you've had, not just in plant care, but in growing your business and choosing the right clients and the services that they need is just very inspiring for everybody. So,
thanks. Thank you, Barry. Listen, like I said, it's your fault, so I appreciate that.
And thank you for the pollinator gardens that I have on my property now.
All good, buddy boy.
Yeah. So again, Rik will be back later on next week. I'm again very, very honored. We have Chip Osborne from Osborne Organics. We'll be talking about organic land care. He's the guru for many of us.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yep. And also, I want to leave you with one other thing. Just for registering here and watching the video, we're giving discounts to anybody. All you have to do is go to our website, Terra Environmental, and when you're checking out, put in the code organic with the capital O and then 25 after that, and you'll get a discount. So again, that's organic 25.
Rik, there is one question left in the chat.
Oh.
If you don't mind taking them just a moment to answer. Stephen had a question about, can you go into detail on all the different ways you utilize air spading?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite tools. So originally, just real quick, if you don't know, air spade was originally developed by the United States government to find unexploded munitions. And that's where the magic happens with the air spade. So basically it's a tool, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a tool, long handle, looks like a shovel handle, and it uses high compressed air to loosen up soil around root flares. So you can do root collar excavations, find girdling roots, incorporate compost and things like that. So the magic happens in the tip of that air spade. So instead of it being a pinpoint, the air is diffused, so it doesn't damage the fine root hairs. Like a rototiller, like I mentioned with some of the work we do, if we have a large stand of trees and we can't get grass to grow, we'll remove the turf grass, or like I mentioned in that one slide, we'll remove the pachysandra, and then we'll use our air spade as a tiller, incorporate compost if it needs it. Soil test first. If it needs it, then we'll incorporate compost. Maybe some mycorrhizae and things like that. But the whole idea with that is you use that as a sort of a rototiller. It doesn't damage the fine root hairs of the trees and other plants that are around it. That's one way we use it. Again, root collaring trees to find girdling roots, remove superfluous roots, take mulch and soil away from the collars of the trees. We've actually even used it for tunneling underneath walkways. If we've had to get underneath a walkway to get a piece of conduit or something under a walkway, we've used it for that. I've used the air spade for transplanting hedges. I would take the air spade and cut a channel, like a channel in front of the hedge, and get in there with a backhoe and with the bucket of the backhoe and scoop out a 4-foot wide piece of a hedge and just put it right in place in another spot without having to move, plants individually. There's a lot of different ways. Again, you can get creative with it, but those are mostly the way we use them. The biggest way we use it is to root collar excavations. Again, filing girdling roots, doing root invigorations. You can do radial trenching around trees, which is like if you envision the spokes of a bicycle. You can go out from the crown or from the center of the tree, like the spokes on a wheel, and incorporate organic matter and help to rejuvenate that root system. And that's a good way to start to incorporate organic matter into that root system without taking away a big piece of turf, which gets expensive. It's a more cost-effective way to start to do that. That's basically the way we use an air spade.
Yeah,
Sure,
20 years ago, we were doing that at the tree care company I worked with, and it really is an amazing tool. We saved some major mature trees from compaction, from construction and everything. Just doing the spoke of the wheels, and we would backfill it with composted worm castings. Worked great.
Yep. Anything else?
I have a quick question, Rick. Can you describe your ideal client? Like what is the demographic and what kind of people made for really great clients over the years?
It ranges from young couples that have kids, young children, up to folks of retirement age. It really varies, which goes to the point of how highly in demand these services are, because especially now at this point, that demographic is pretty broad. It's not just like 35 to 50. It's late 20s to 60s and on. So yeah, it's a niche, but it's a niche that's pretty broad. And I think if the industry would gravitate this way, it would pick up faster. I think the problem is the industry's not ready. I think culturally are the folks of New Jersey, I think, are ready, and I think in other areas of the country they are as well. But I just think there's a disconnect between the contractors and the homeowners or institutional owners, that it's not syncing up. But that demographic is pretty broad. Yep.
Eric's
Yeah,
got
I agree 100% with that. There's more and more demand for it all the time, and there aren't that many companies that are able to do these kind of services and meet the demand.
Eric's got a question, and I want to even add a little sauce to his question. I'd like to know how you're finding your clients, and Eric wants to know how you can scale from 30 to 300 customers.
Well, I mean, if you could scale a landscape company from 30 to 300, you could certainly scale a landscape company that's doing this kind of work from 30 to 300. Rachel, I'll go back to his point, but what was your first part of that question? Sorry, the sauce threw me off, Rachel.
Oh, okay, the sauce. What I wanted to know is, how are you finding these customers, and then how do you scale up from 30 to 300? Right.
So finding them is easy. Like I mentioned, our marketing is pretty targeted, and they find us. So it's been a long time since I've actually gone around and put flyers on mailboxes and things like that, because our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and our website has a pretty strong presence, and they typically find us. Scaling up, I mean, like I said, the difficult part for us scaling up is getting the employees. I think we very easily could scale up from 30 to 300 if we could get the help. So anybody that's on this call need a job, we got openings. So it's doable. I mean, Yeah, I mean, our business model shows that we can do it, and the amount of work that we turn away shows that we can do it. So it's just a matter of having the dogs in the fight to get from 30 to 300. The biggest problem is the labor issues.
So scaling up, his question was more like, how would you scale from 30 to 300? Maybe you could elaborate on the things that worked to do that.
Okay, so typically where it gets sketchy is 90%, 75% of the landscape companies do around $500,000 in revenue. There's like 1% that does over 10 million. And when you're in that 500 to 750,000 range, that's the most difficult part to get to 1 million, to get over that hurdle, because you're constantly juggling. Do I have enough employees? Do I need to get another employee? Well, I have 3 or 4 guys. Should I go get a truck and trailer? And start another crew. Those are all those things that make it really difficult. If Eric could, was Eric that had that question? If he could just put in the chat, and if you could tell me, Rachel, how big his company is now, that would be awesome.
Hey Rick, it's Eric. You know, I'm just
It's
asking.
you. Hi Eric, how are you?
How you doing? I don't have a company.
Gotcha.
I'm with Newdorf, the guys that make Fiesta and Final Stand. So, you know, from a scalability, I'm always interested in others' opinions on how we get over the hump and make this more of a, you know, of a niche to a non-niche demand.
Right.
That's really kind of where I'm going with that.
Yeah, right. So again, it's the disconnect, man. I mean, it's a disconnect between the public and the industry. The more folks will advertise for it, the more the public will gravitate towards the industry doing this kind of work. And the scaling up part is just like, if you can run a business, you know, like I said, that 500 to 750,000 range is that's probably one of the most difficult spots to be in running a landscape business, because there's just so much uncertainty within those numbers. Do you need 7 guys or do you need 4 guys? Again, do you need to start another crew? And when it comes to scalability, it's really that individual knowing their numbers to say, okay, well, I mean, our target for our company is we want individual revenue to be at roughly 125,000 of revenue per employee. That's the target. Last year we did 150, so we were good. Even though we had issues with labor, we were good monetary wise. So I think that's an important thing to realize too, is that number. If you can make 125,000 in revenue per employee, you're going to be in a pretty good spot to scale up from there. Anything less than that, if you're doing 90, 85, or 75 or less, you're going to be in a tough spot to go anywhere. You're going to be a tough spot to even stay in business. So it's really knowing your numbers, knowing what it takes to be profitable, and then again targeting a market that's out there. And again, like I said in the onset, it doesn't need to be an all or nothing like we do. It can be incremental. And there's so much awareness nowadays of native plants and battery powered equipment that, I think any contractor that put that on their website, would probably get some hits on that, for people trying to find that kind of work. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but I think it's more than just a simple equation. There's a lot to that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Scaling up,
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
And I just want to bring up that Eric will be doing a presentation for us, talking about Fiesta and a new product they have out. That will be on April 12th.
Nice. Where do I register?
Just go to our website.
All right. Anything else?
All right,
Rachel?
so we need to wrap this up. If there are any more questions, now is the time. And just remember to take advantage of that code organic 25 to get your discount on products. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank
good
you.
night.